been a while since I've been on. I just wanted to do a stream today to go over a topic that's been giving me a lot of irritation as I see it play out over and over again. I'm going to give people some time to show up, and in the meantime, um, you guys can check out some of my other content or whatever as I'm getting ready to go here. I had to generate the something weird. Like I tried to regenerate the stream, like, or generate the stream, and it didn't create the episode. So like now I got to make sure I just send the link out to everyone. So anyway, how you guys been? I see Lucifer the Doberman in the chat. I've been kind of, I don't want to say black pilled necessarily. I've been just kind of burned out, I guess would be the word to use for it. It's still frustrating to me that um, people who did like a quarter as much like work as I used to make content, not even a quarter, more like a fifth, a tenth or whatever, end up with just enormous amounts of viewers. I did a few things to try to improve that, including going to make shorts and stuff like that, and didn't really seem to affect it very much. So I guess we'll see. Um, Meantime, I have been on. That was the other thing. I was watching one of Johnny's streams the other day, and he had like 120 viewers, and he has less subscribers than me, and I was very happy for him. I think it was cool, but at the same time, it was strange the way that the algorithm works. It's never really been fair, I guess would be the word to put it. I know that it used to be much easier to get exposure. Uh, like I talked to Neo Unrealist about this when I was on his stream, and he said that like he got in towards the end because there was a time that it was much easier to get subscribers, and then they banned his channel altogether. He's actually only on Rumble now, and he's not unfortunately on very often. But let me share this in a few more places. I just put it in a bunch of places in Discord. I'm going to put it on a bunch of places on Facebook because, again, it wouldn't let me pre-generate the episode everywhere for some reason. And then we'll get started. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. I've been kind of dealing with a lot of stuff at home that has kind of affected my morale, so to speak. And when I can't be the guy that you guys are used to me being, which is like rational and calm and analytical about everything, rather than allow myself to make crappy content, I basically kind of self-censor. But we're going to be going over some stuff that we already looked at, as far as like some of my older content, because I know a lot of you guys, you tune in for streams, but you don't tune in for the other like content that I do. So sometimes, many cases, I find that you guys have only actually seen an episode if like of V Radio if I shared it with you. Facebook is being dumb. Okay. All right. Well, that should do it. Oh, I should probably post it on Twitter. That's the other thing that's been interesting is I've been getting more viewers on Twitter than anywhere else, which I find interesting. All right, 1 second. Oh, almost done, guys. There we go. All right. So let's have a look at what is going on in the chat, and then I will take it from there. All right, let's pull up this chat thingy. Yes, the thingy. I call it a thingy. I'm so descriptive. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the overlay so I can talk to you guys while I'm waiting for a few more people to show up because I've just posted it in a bunch of different places. All right. All right. Lucifer says, hello. When Dems talk about our democracy, they're not talking about your democracy. This is funny because I've actually said something like this in one of my older videos that we will be rewatching today as part of this stream. But it's not just Dems. It's basically parties in general. That's why if you look at the artwork for my show, I'm holding up an elephant and a donkey. It's like the heads of them because the real threat to our democracy is just political parties in general. But we'll get into my arguments for that in a moment. Let me turn off my phone so this thing doesn't ring on us. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in and sticking with me through all of this. I've reached out to her, and Kywin, because you've been asking me about this, she asked to look at my channel, and then I never heard back. So I have no idea. I tried. The Libertarian Party is a threat to democracy? You're going to have to explain that to me. I'll be interested to hear. Do your eyes deceive you? No. I'm here. Yeah. Who's all tuned in here? Let's see. There's 10 on Twitter, 22 on YouTube, and 1 on Twitch so far. Cool. Yeah, Strategic Eyes got a bunch of new subscribers, and then he stopped getting them. And then Johnny, like, he's getting more viewers, but he's not getting more subscribers. Yeah. So let's see here. Just looking around. Oh, look at that. Lady Dee or Dai. You'll have to assuming yep, over on Twitch. My single Twitch viewer. What's the reason I keep going to Twitch is there's always like 1 or 2 people who are consistently there. I watched Arcada during Rittenhouse where I found out about you. Your takes all seem kind of base, so I followed, but since then, you haven't been covering things I'm interested in. Well, let me know what you're interested in, Will. You can always join us on Discord. The link to the Discord should be in the description for this episode. And I'll be happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. My views on Ricada, like Good Logic was trying to get him to let me come on his show more than once. And he just wasn't interested. He turned his nose up at the idea. So I've never actually been able to sit through an entire Ricada law stream. I like Good Logic and I like Nate the Lawyer. Those two I think are probably the best content creators to come out of the whole LawTube thing. But anyway, I'm not sure what a lake surgery is, but I did have stomach surgery and I've lost about 140 pounds. So doing pretty good. Yep, I like this too. The Republicans set up what the Democrats are doing, so both. Wow, I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, I got called a MAGA supporter because I have a Godson flag the other day. JP Mexican, aren't you a Sitch and Adam guy? That's like where you discovered me? I'm pretty sure you are. Yeah, Adam blocked me on Twitter again because he was describing himself as someone on the left and people were going after him about it. And so I said, wait till you hear him, protect, or rather defend George Bush and, Dick Cheney, and he blocked me again, so Sitch blocked me a while ago, but I thought about doing it because I do have one more stream I wanted to do about them because I have a bunch of clips of them shit talking me and making up lies, like, Sitch claimed that I made up another, account just to argue with him, but I had had that second account for quite a while. But anyway, not important at the moment. So, let me see here. I don't know what they're talking about the 10 years ago. Yeah, if you want notifications, guys, really the best way is just to join us on Discord. Um, you know, it's really comes down to the fact that I my notifications don't really go out. And I get told all the time by people that they've been unsubscribed to my channel. When Good Logic had me on his stream, I gained about 1,000, and then we literally watched as 800 of them just disappeared. You know, yeah, Lucifer, you didn't know that Sitch blocked me? That happened a while ago, dude. I did a video about it. You can watch it. Um, oh, what's this? Oh, okay. Thanks for the donation, Lucifer. And be careful going cliff diving. Oh, man. Okay. Based. Like paste. So, we're going to be discussing this issue a little bit today, as well as far as to what the differences are between a democracy and a constitutional republic, and the real origins of why there was so much argument about democracy. And I want to be clear, both democracies and republics have their problems. Neither of them is perfect. I think a combination of both is kind of what's in order, really. But I don't think that if people are going to make the argument about mob rule being a problem, I don't see why the mob is better suited to pick someone else to make all their decisions for them. That's not superior. If you're worried about mob rule, and don't get me wrong, I'm worried about mob rule right now too. That's okay, John. I've been waiting a little longer just to see if more people wanted to join anyway, so you didn't miss anything yet. Yeah, make sure you smash the like button, folks. But anyway, the point is that especially with the way things have been manipulated to make people even more stupid politically lately. I'm not a big fan of it, but there are things that get done through direct democratic referendum, which are a lot better, in my opinion. An excellent example would be in Switzerland. They have direct democracy referendums that are required to take their military to war. You can't go to war other than defensively in Switzerland unless you can get the public to vote for it. And in contrast, the Iraq War was at like a 20% favorability rating, and people were just like supposed to be forced to deal with it. So, but anyway, um, you want to know who the black groups were that were involved with Occupy Wall Street? Well, there's BAM, spelled BAMN, and they're kind of, in my opinion, the prototype for what became the violent wing of Black Lives Matter. Uh, they actually tried to block a resolution that I put forward at Occupy Detroit to denounce all violence. And Occupy was strictly nonviolent. It was very much like MLK style, and they were around, causing problems. So. If we were a democracy, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. That's why I said there needs to be a combination, because rule of the majority, like, tyranny of a majority is not better than tyranny of a minority. Both of those systems are flawed, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm going to get to the bottom here. And okay, good stuff. So going back over this, we're not a goddamn democracy. We're a federated republic under democratic rules. Right. So we are in a system where two political parties more or less decide who we get to choose from. And that somehow leads to more liberty. I don't think that works. I don't think that on its own works. That would be my concern. I think that, you need to have elected officials who are held in check by democratic referendum. But we'll get into that as we get into this. So first of all, I wanted to share an article that actually was what inspired me to start this today. And it has to do with the left has been pushing this narrative lately that supposedly the GOP is the serious threat to democracy. And this gets parroted around quite a bit. And I have to answer this. Sitch lies 90% of the time. Don't think you're special because he lied about you. Well, yeah, I suppose that's possible. I'm just saying that he went on his show to lie about it because they were in kind of a conundrum because they pushed me and had me on their show a few times. And then they bring me on and want to debate Iraq with me. And, so then I made a reply video to them and they did not want to ever address that happened. And then Adam actually agreed to debate me and it would have been moderated by Good Logic. He agreed to do it and then just wouldn't set up the date, So anyway, we'll get into that another time. Going to get into today's topic. So this is from a Vox article. I used Vox because it's left-leaning, but basically it starts with the Republican revolt against democracy explained in 13 charts. The Trump years revealed a dark truth. The Republican Party is no longer committed to democracy. These charts tell the story. And it says the Republican Party is the biggest threat to American democracy today, is a radical obstructionist faction that has become hostile to the most basic democratic norm, that the other side should get to wield power when it wins elections. A few years ago, these statements may have sounded like partisan democratic hyperbole, because they do. But in the wake of January 6th attack on the Capitol and Trump's acquittal in the Senate on the charge of inciting it, they seem more in plain description of where we're at as a country. But how does the GOP's problem with democracy, how deep does the problem run really? How do things get so bad, and is it likely to get worse? So I'm just going to skip ahead here to this. Today's Republicans really hate Democrats and democracy. Trump supporters have embraced anti-democratic ideas. Now, so what are examples of anti-democratic ideas? Supporting Trump's election fraud claims, distrusting the 2020 presidential election, believe voting shouldn't be easier, distrust the 2020 congressional election. Okay, I want a third term for Trump. Now, I actually want more term limits, not less, but it doesn't change the fact that the rest of this is basically bullshit. Support Trump's election fraud claims. So it is anti-democratic to be concerned about the veracity of elections, or the legitimacy of elections. That's anti-democratic. And if you believe in election fraud, then you're anti-democratic. You would think that actually the opposite would be the truth, because that doesn't make any sense. Obviously, if you are a Democratic, advocate, then you should be concerned about elections. And so supporting the idea that the election may have been stolen or in some way, compromised is supposedly something that's just way anti-democratic. So that's why I actually had this video that I'm going to play now. It's on my channel for those of you guys who want to check it out. But I have enough memory to remember when discussing the issue of whether or not elections were legitimate was something that was on the left. And this is something that I have a problem with, which is one of the reasons why I said, I'm a left-leaning independent, but overall, I don't think people should anyway identify with a given tribe, is because it's always fine as long as your side wins. That's really what is at stake here. It's always, fine as long as your side wins. And if the other side doesn't like it, well, then that's a problem for them. That means that they're crazy conspiracy theorists or whatever. So let's have a look at this. And if you guys ever just want to link just this video, I have it on my channel. So here is 20 minutes of people on the left complaining about election fraud.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. And you can have the election stolen from you.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's a real
what I'm
thing.
scared about in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate president that didn't really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right.
He's an illegitimate president in my mind.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate?
Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered.
Russia interfered with our election, attacked our democracy for the sole purpose of artificially placing someone at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They were successful.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
The president-elect, although legally elected, is not legitimate.
I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
You said you believe that Russia's interference altered the outcome of the election.
I do. We have a president who, if in fact it is proven, has been assisted by the Russians and may in fact not be a legitimate president.
The one thing that Trump is fearful of when it comes to his being president is that finally we will see how illegitimate his victory actually was.
I have an objection.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina. I object because people are horrified.
He's an illegitimate president.
Our election was hijacked. There is no question. Congress has a duty to hashtag protect our democracy and hashtag follow the facts.
John Lewis is. I want to play this back again real quick because, like, this is really important. But what you were looking at was this is Democrats objecting to electoral votes being cast, which is exactly. This is exactly what was going on January 6th, only in the other direction. These are people that are basically like, debating on whether or not those votes should be cast. This is exactly what they were doing in January 6th. But, again, it's different if Democrats are doing it. But anyway.
Object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina. I object because people are horrified.
He's an illegitimate president.
Our election was hijacked. There is no question. Congress has a duty to hashtag protect our democracy and hashtag follow the facts.
John Lewis is completely right. There is a cloud of illegitimacy around the election of Donald Trump. The Russians interfered with his election. James Comey and the FBI interfered with his election. The fake news industry interfered with his election.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president who got illegitimate foreign help.
Do you believe Trump is a legitimate president?
What I believe is that there's no question that the outcome of this election was affected by the Russian interference.
There absolutely is a cloud of illegitimacy.
So that legitimacy is in question, yes.
So that was a very tainted election, and in that sense, it's illegitimate.
Why do you think the president is going to such great lengths to essentially prove that he beat you?
Because he knows he didn't. He knows he's an illegitimate president.
Stolen emails, stolen drone, stolen election. Welcome to the world of unprecedented Trump.
So do you believe President Trump is an illegitimate president?
Based on what I just said, which I can't retract.
He tweeted in February 2018, quote, "The more we learn about the 2016 election, the more illegitimate it becomes. America deserves to know whether we have a fake president in the Oval Office."
The Russian attempt to have the election, and frankly, the FBI is weighing in on the election, I think makes his election illegitimate.
There was a widespread understanding that this election was not on the level. We still don't know what really happened, Isaac. I mean, there's just a lot that I think will be revealed, history will discover, but you don't win by 3 million votes and have all this other shenanigan stuff going on and not come away with an idea like, whoa, something's not right here.
Seems to me that there's a cloud of illegitimacy that continues to hang over 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
The outcome of the election was affected by their interference, and now we need to know, to what degree, if any, the Trump campaign was actually in collusion with with Russia.
He knows he's an illegitimate president. So of course he's obsessed with me, and I believe that it's a guilty conscience.
We actually won the last presidential election, folks. They stole the last presidential election.
If Al Gore won that election, I think he won it anyway.
Actually, I think I carried Florida.
Al Gore won the election nationwide and also in Florida, but the Supreme Court ruled the other way.
Al Gore got more votes, but not enough to stay out of the Supreme Court, where President Bush was elected 5-4.
Bush versus Gore. A court took away a presidency.
If all the votes were counted in Florida, that Al Gore would be president today and George Bush would be back in office.
I come from Florida, where you and others participated in what I call the United States
coup d'etat.
In 2013, according to reports, Vice President Joe Biden, he claimed that Al Gore was the one who was elected president. And he claimed that the recount result was, quote, a bad decision.
And never forget, dear friends, what they did in Florida to Al Gore and me, to all of us, to older Americans, to African Americans, to Haitian Americans, denied the right to vote and have those votes counted.
I do believe that the projections were right in the first place at 7 o'clock when they called it for Gore.
Let me tell you something, without a doubt. George Bush did not carry Florida, and it was not close.
There's no question that you won the state of Florida.
Oh, thank you, Charlotte.
No, it's a question. That's a question.
We will never know because the votes weren't counted. But
did, in your judgment...
I mean, that's a fact. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And there is no other way of saying it but be very blunt. Al Gore won the state of Florida in 2000, and we should never forget it.
Most Americans, or a great many Americans, don't have confidence that the election of 2000 was fair.
But I don't believe we lost. I believe we just failed to have all of the votes counted.
The Supreme Court elected the president.
2004, yes.
Al Gore won the state of Florida in 2000, although not the presidency.
We know we won this election. They know we won this election. And Americans know we won this election.
I know some people want you to believe that the Gore campaign was a campaign that wasn't able to complete its mission. We did. Had all of those votes been counted in Florida, I think Al Gore would be president today.
We had more votes. We won. And we are never going to let the United States Supreme Court choose the President of the United States again.
You should know by now, based on the fact that he lost the popular vote by more than 500,000 voters, and we don't know how many he lost in Florida.
There's no doubt in my mind that Al Gore was elected president.
I rise to object to the fraudulent 25 Florida electoral votes.
Really, we won the election in 2000, but they stole the election.
I must object because of the overwhelming evidence of official misconduct, deliberate fraud, and an attempt to...
So once again, folks, listen to that. I object to the fraudulent votes. These are people voicing before the Senate that they object to votes being placed in that election because they had concerns of election fraud. Let's continue.
Enron had already helped the Bush team with such favors as ferrying their rent-a-mob to Florida in 2000 to permanently halt the counting of legally cast ballots.
It is signed by myself on behalf of my diverse constituents and the millions of Americans who have been disenfranchised by Florida's inaccurate vote count. The Supreme Court, not the people of the United States, decided this election.
Speaking to a Democratic group in Chicago Tuesday, he made it clear he thinks Al Gore was the winner.
By the time it was over, our candidate had won the popular vote, and the only way they could win the election was to stop the voting in Florida.
Catherine Harris, Jeb Bush, Jim Baker, and the Supreme Court hadn't tampered with the results, Al Gore would be president.
I think that the issue before us today is not who won or should have won the 2000 presidential election. That issue has been settled, not to my belief, but it has been settled.
Let's just drop the vice. President Gore, that's all right. Al Gore should have been president of the United States.
Al Gore made it possible for George Bush to be the only appointed president in the history of these United States.
Democrats have won the past 3 presidential elections. In 2000, unions turned out 25% of the vote, and Al Gore won.
But the Supreme Court tampered? That's a large charge. The Supreme Court stopped the counting of the votes, and if they'd let the count go on, Al Gore would have got the necessary votes.
The Supreme Court selected George W. Bush as the president. He was not elected. There is overwhelming evidence that George W. Bush did not win this election.
What I observed as a voter, as a citizen of Illinois 4 years ago, were troubling evidence of the fact that not every vote was being counted.
I don't think that George W. Bush won the election in 2000 against Al Gore because I think he probably lost Florida and also that nationwide.
If you invite me back on this show in about 8 weeks, I think you're going to learn that Al Gore actually did get all the votes there.
I felt what happened in Florida was a carefully worked out conspiracy. That many things could not go wrong in one state without there having been a conspiracy. And many different things did go wrong. Many tricks were pulled of various kinds.
The vice president did win, but and I do believe that the majority of voters that intended to go to polls last year wanted to vote and cast their votes for Al Gore. I do believe that in terms of Florida as well.
The court has been thwarting formation of the popular will, the most spectacular example being Bush versus Gore, where the majority, by a 5-4 vote, enjoined the counting of more than 100,000 ballots in Florida and essentially gave America its first court-appointed president.
Even though Al Gore won the election, he won't take office.
That election was stolen from the rightful winner. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm here today to talk about a stolen presidential election.
I think in 2000, everybody thought, well, he did win the election, Al Gore.
He started dividing America here in Florida by trying to take an election that I think any reasonable person would say he hadn't actually won.
What happened in Florida will go down in history as a coup d'etat.
Could we conclude, or is it possible that there was a conspiracy and Florida officials were involved in the conspiracy? Never have so many things gone so wrong in one place before. How did all these things happen all at the same time in the same state? And is not it possible that there was a conspiracy that was very well organized? Why were the state police out there on that day, election day, checking license plates and so forth? You know, how did all these things happen in one state at one time in one election? Is it possible that we ought to use the word conspiracy and not be afraid of it?
And I sure wish Gore was president right now. He should be.
Well, he actually got elected.
Well, good.
A battle that by the will of the people should have ended in victory. But tens of thousands of Florida votes either were not counted or tossed out in the 2000 presidential election.
5 Supreme Court justices trumped the votes of 51 million Americans. We should have let the entire state be recounted so that it was clear that Al Gore actually won the state of Florida.
And Al Gore won the election.
We had the election stolen from us. And you must admit that. They stole it. And we need a leader to help us get revenge.
I voted for Al Gore. He won the election.
They usurped the powers of the Florida Supreme Court and intervened. It was a fix as far as we're concerned. You know, there's no polite way to talk about it except the fix was in.
After the election, when you stole the election, you came back here and said, get over it. No, we're not going to get over it.
You know it, I know it, they know it. We won that election.
Constantly shifting vote tallies in Ohio and malfunctioning electronic machines, which may not have paper receipts, have led to additional loss of confidence by the public.
The right to...
That was Nancy Pelosi talking about concerns about voting machines. Nancy Pelosi talking about the concerns in regards to whether or not voting machines are reliable. As strategic guys would say, let's keep going.
The vote has been stolen from qualified voters.
The New Yorker reported that Kerry thought that, quote, proxies for Bush had rigged many of the voting machines.
In 2004, the democratic process was thwarted.
The 2004 presidential election in Ohio was riddled with unnecessary problems.
Some machines malfunctioned, causing votes to be counted more than once, or not at all.
Based upon an inordinate number of allegations suggesting gross voting rights violations and misconduct, I join with my colleagues in objecting to counting the state of Ohio's electoral votes.
As in 2000, the votes of many who wanted to vote were not, in fact, counted.
This last Friday night, I arranged to meet Senator Kerry at a fundraiser to give him a copy of my book. He told me he now thinks the election was stolen.
The wife of John Kerry said she has lingering doubts about the legitimacy of the election. Her theory goes like this. 2 brothers, she calls hard right Republicans, own 80% of voting machines in the U.S. Therefore, it would be easy to hack into the mother machines that control the electronic voting.
There were numerous irregularities in Ohio, including large percentages of rejections of provisional balloting, problems with voting machines.
As we look at our election system, I think it's fair to say that there are many legitimate questions about its accuracy, about its integrity.
There are still legitimate concerns over the integrity of our elections.
The question, obviously, is how many instances were not caught that we don't know about. Number one, we've seen a lot of what I'll call honest glitches where it just didn't work right. But also that these machines are hackable. A dishonest employee of the vendor, or a dishonest employee of a local board of elections, or simply someone who knows electronics and has a computer at home, could hack into these machines and put in a secret instruction to disregard every 20th Democratic vote or add 10% to the carry or to the Bush vote or whatever, and you might not ever know it.
I agree with tens of millions of Americans who are very worried that when they cast the ballot on an electronic voting machine, that there is no paper trail to record that vote.
The numerous irregularities that occurred with the electronic voting machines in Ohio on November the 2nd of last year point to an unresolved national crisis.
We cannot declare that the election of November 2nd, 2004 was free and clear and transparent and real. There must be independent testing of the voting machines used in Ohio.
I'm not confident that the election in Ohio was fairly decided. We know that there was substantial voter suppression, and the machines were not reliable.
The members of Congress who have brought this challenge are speaking up for their aggrieved constituents, many of whom may have been disenfranchised in this process.
Treating today's electoral vote count in Congress as a meaningless ritual would be an insult to our democracy unless we registered our own protest against the obviously flawed voting process that took place in so many of our states.
Voters who wish to cast a vote for president or vice president can't approach the polls with certainty that their vote will be counted.
One of the most significant problems in Ohio and in many other states was the lack of measures to ensure the integrity of electronic voting machines.
In 2004, they caused Democratic voters in Ohio to wait for 8 hours before they could cast their ballot. They turned the Department of Civil Rights and the Justice Department into the voter suppression division with voter ID laws, voter purging, voter caging, voter intimidation. There aren't going to be any more election stealings.
I do have one very affirmative statement to make. We won, but I didn't lose. I got the votes, but we won't know exactly how many because of how they cheated. I did win my election. I just didn't get to have the job. We were robbed of an election.
Without voter suppression, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of Georgia. Andrew Gillum is the governor of Florida.
Using the word rigged, using the word steal, do you think it's dangerous going into 2020?
I don't, because we can actually back it up. And so in response to what I believe was a stolen election, and I'm not saying they stole it from me, they stole it from the voters of Georgia. In fact, someone outside asked if I'm ever going to concede. The answer is no.
If she'd had a fair election, she already would have won.
This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. And I will not concede because the erosion of our democracy is not right.
You refused to concede and say that you lost. Do you stand by that decision today?
Absolutely.
If Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear.
Steal your election. It was not a free and fair election. I think the election was stolen from the people of Georgia. I believe it was stolen from the voters.
I think that Stacey Abrams' election is being stolen from her.
The election was not fair. The process was not fair. Thousands of Georgians had their voices stolen because they were not able to cast ballots, and they cannot be guaranteed that their votes will be counted in 2020 if we don't do this right.
If what happens to you happens nationally, and we see whoever wins the Democratic nominee, if they say, actually, I can prove that there's a number of votes in every state and that the same thing that you just described happens in multiple states, should they concede?
I do not think we should concede an election until we know the results of an election. I still fundamentally believed it could be fair. And that's just not how life works. If it looks like it's cheating, it probably is. If it looks like it's rigged, it probably is.
She would be the governor of Georgia today had the governor of Georgia not disenfranchised 1.4 million Georgia voters before the election. That's what happened to Stacey Abrams. They took the votes away.
We've been raised to believe that it is invalid, in fact it is uncouth to call question. That if you want to run for office again, you've got to concede the election so that everyone knows you're a good sport. I'm not.
You notably did not concede.
I did not.
Okay, you acknowledged that he won, but you did not concede.
Correct.
5 months later, do you still feel like your opponent won through voter suppression?
Yes.
Reminder, she wrote, Brian Kemp stole the gubernatorial election from Georgians and Stacey Abrams.
I said that the election was stolen from Georgia voters. The process that took place during the legislative cycle was one that did not countenance and did not pay attention to the deep and real concerns of those who watched this election be stolen in the state of Georgia. It was stolen from the voters of Georgia. Georgia voters did not have their votes counted. They were not allowed to cast votes. They had their votes discarded.
It certainly gave the appearance of unfairness, and I think it was unfairness. Stacey ran a great campaign. She probably won.
And it was not fair to those who filled out absentee ballots, and depending on the county you sent it to, it either was counted or not counted, assuming you received it in time. Brian Kemp oversaw for 8 years the systematic and systemic dismantling of our democracy, and that means there could not be free and fair elections in Georgia. As long as we have eligible American citizens who cannot cast a ballot, then the game is rigged. I am complicit if I say that that system is fair. Concession in the political space is an acknowledgement that the process was fair. And I don't believe that to be so. But I refuse to concede because concession means that the process was proper, that the result was true and right, and I cannot say that. I tend to say I didn't lose, I just didn't win. And I don't call it a loss, I just didn't win. But yes, you did. Okay, officially. Yeah, officially. Put it this way, I didn't get to get inaugurated, and that's problematic. Okay. But will I say that this election was not tainted, was not a disinvestment and a disenfranchisement of thousands of voters? I will not say that.
Candidates, both black and white, lost their races because they have been deprived of the votes they otherwise would have gotten. And the clearest example is from next door in Georgia. Stacey Abrams should be governor, leading that state right now.
I was joking with Beth backstage when Cliff said, she lost. I'm like, no, I just didn't win. Because we don't know what really happened because of the miasma of voter suppression. I can't know for a fact that I would be the governor of Georgia but for the malfeasance and the mismanagement of Brian Kemp, but I know it's a pretty good guess. So I can't prove that I would have won, but I know we don't know because of how he behaved.
Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the person who won an adequate number of votes
but that's
to become the governor.
With all due respect, and I respect where you're coming from, and I respect the issues that you're raising, you're not answering the question. Do you think it was... You're not using the word legitimate. Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the legal governor of Georgia.
You see, I'm here to tell you that just because you win doesn't mean you're won.
You said to me that you did not lose, you just did not win.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about that.
Bad news is that we didn't get the victory we secured. And the thing is, we will never know empirically that I got more votes because we will never know which votes didn't get counted.
This was not fair, it was not right, and it is deeply improper that someone could ascend to that role having performed so basely and so crassly against the very people he is now supposed to represent. The election was not fair, the process was not fair.
So you don't feel that you lost fair and square?
I do recognize I am not the governor of Georgia, but I do like to point out something that is true for me and for many in our state, and that is we won.
I'm not saying it's going to be legit. It's the increase in the prospect of being illegitimate is a direct proportion to us not being able to get these reforms passed.
Right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election.
It's not as if it's just Republicans who have monkeyed around with elections in the past. Sometimes Democrats have too. Whenever people are in power, they have this tendency to try to tilt things in their direction.
How we doing?
Okay. I'll cut that off. All right. So 20 minutes of prominent Democrats complaining about election fraud and discussing the issue openly, and basically, so going back to like why I shared that, let's have a look again at this article, because this is the reason, according to Vox, why Republicans, they're embracing anti-democratic ideas. Why do we know that? Well, because they support Trump's election fraud claims. So it's anti-democratic. This means you don't believe in democracy if you're concerned about, the actual, the actual legitimacy of an election, and then distrusting the 2020 presidential election results. So I guess according to Vox, what you just watched was 20 minutes of Democrats engaging in embracing an anti-democratic ideas. Now, when it comes to Bush Gore and Bush Kerry, I actually do believe there was election fraud. But the reason why is because of the fact that I interviewed the man that I'm about to show you a clip of who testified before Congress. And you're going to see some prominent Democrats listening to this guy give his testimony. His name is Clint Curtis. He's a friend of mine. I'm actually working on getting him back on the show. But this video is also available on my channel. And the documentary that they made about him and what happened to him was pretty interesting. And you can find that on my BitChute channel. But anyway, here we go.
Mr. Curtis, would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Clinton Eugene Curtis.
And where do you reside?
Tallahassee, Florida.
And what is your profession?
I'm a computer programmer.
Would you please speak into the microphone so the audience can hear your testimony?
I'm a computer programmer.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for President Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Mr. Would you answer that question once again?
They would never see it.
So how would such a program, a secret program that fixes the election, how could it be detected?
You would have to view it either in the source code, or you'd have to have a receipt and then count the hard paper against the actual vote total. Other than that, you won't see it.
All right, Mr. Curtis, if you had been asked, you or others with your professional expertise had been asked to design a protective program that would protect the Ohio elections from against such software to fix the election, could you have done so?
If we've been asked to make a program that could fix the election, sure, anybody can do it.
No, could you have designed a program or a procedure or a protocol that would have protected Ohio against this kind of rigging?
No, you have to look at the source code. You have to get probably programmers from both or all parties to look at the source code and determine if there's anything in there that shouldn't be there. I mean, it's a simple program. You're adding 1 to a person's total. It's 100 lines of code tops.
All right. Are you aware of whether there was any protective action in Ohio against this kind of vote rigging through software?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
You were not asked to assist in the development of any protective system, is that correct?
No, I was not.
In Europe, have you reviewed at all the election results in Ohio?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Given the availability of such vote rigging software and the testimony that has been given under oath of substantial statistical anomalies and gross differences between exit polling data and the actual tabulated results, do you have an opinion whether or not the Ohio election, presidential election, was hacked?
Yes, I would say it was. I mean, if you have exit polling data that is significantly off from the vote, then it's probably hacked.
And your testimony is under oath.
Yes, sir.
And the testimony you've given is true.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Stephanie Capshaw, Congresswoman Waters and I have the same question. Come back to the podium. Who did you say you were asked to prepare?
I was asked by Tom Feeney. He's now a congressman. At that time, he was Speaker of the House of Florida, Yang Enterprises, which was the company I worked for, lobbyist, and their corporate attorney, who wore a lot of hats.
And at the time, he was the Speaker of the House of Florida. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Congressman.
You say he was the lobbyist for the voting machine company at the same time he was Speaker of the House?
I don't know what the voting machine company is. He was a lobbyist for Yang Enterprises. We had NASA contracts. And
Yang Enterprises did what? Computers?
Computers.
Okay, and he was your lobbyist. Your company's
the lobbyist for that company, yes.
And he asked you to design a code to rig an election.
Yes.
While he was Speaker of the Florida House.
Yes.
This was during or previous to the 2000 election?
Yes, October into September.
And did he ever express why he wanted a code to rig an election?
No, I immediately assumed that they were trying to keep you guys from cheating them. So I wrote up the documentation of what you would look for in the source code, how you would make sure that you didn't get, taken advantage of, make sure that all voting machines had receipts, because that way you could back count the ones that looked a little funny. And I handed it.
By receipts, you mean a paper trail?
Yes, paper trail. And I handed that in to Mrs. Yang and said, here's your report, here's your program. And she said, you don't understand, we need to hide the fraud in the source code.
Hide the fraud, not reveal the fraud.
Not reveal the fraud, because it's needed to control the vote in South Florida, was what she said.
That's what she said. To your knowledge, was this used?
I have no idea. I was ready to leave, so I retired and left the company.
Your testimony a moment ago, I think you said just before you left in answer to Congresswoman Tubbs Jones' question, would you just repeat what you said in terms of the exit polls?
Oh, the exit polls should not be significantly different than the vote.
And if they were, you would conclude what?
I would conclude someone's playing with the vote.
Not with the exit polls?
That's possible too.
Okay,
something is definitely skewed.
Something is skewed in one or the other about.
Right. To select which one, you'd have to see where the problem is.
Let me ask you one further question. Assuming for the moment that such software, that's what you call it, such software to rig a vote was used in one or more machines in Ohio or in Florida, could you today detect that if you looked at the source code?
If you could get the machines and they have not been patched yet, I mean, once they get in and touch them, anything can happen. You can also set timers to do that, but then you see the timers. Then you'd have to take those machines, decompile them, which I couldn't do, but possibly a Microsoft, an MIT, something could do. You might be able to see it.
You might.
Not necessarily. Depends on how good they are at destroying what they had.
Destroying what they had by tampering with the machine afterwards, or by programming a destroy instruction in the first place?
Right, because since you didn't...
Either or both?
Either or both. You didn't actually see what's in there, so you don't know if the code is running in a single executable or running in various modules. If it's running modules, you can make the code actually eat itself.
Let me ask you one further question. I've been told that people who assume that lots of the election results, or that a large fraction of the election result in any state may have been affected by deliberate fraud in the computer, are paranoid, because in order to do that, you have to have access to thousands of machines, and that would be readily detectable. To what extent is that true?
It depends on the technology you use. If you did a central tabulation machine that fed in, all you'd have to do is set a flag. You set a flag, the central tabulation machine would then flip your vote.
So if So one person putting in bad code in a central tabulation machine could affect thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of votes.
Right, and you could activate either automatically, or you could make it so that there's code existing on like an electronic machine that feeds it, where you would punch it in, it would set the flag, the server would see the flag, and then...
And if you had a recount, and there were no paper trail, would that be, assuming that had happened, would that be revealable by seeing a discrepancy between what the central tabulator showed and what the individual machines, which had not been tampered with, showed?
Not if I wrote it.
Why not? In other words,
I would make it match.
You could work back from the tabulator to the individual machines, so the tabulator would tell the machines to switch their results?
Yes, it talks both ways. You can flip it to whatever you need.
And they actually do talk to each other, the machines
As long
and
as
the
they're
tabulator.
hooked up, as long as it's networked together, they can talk to each other.
So in other words, there's absolutely no assurance whatsoever on anything with regard to these machines?
Absolutely none, unless you look at the source code and make sure it's safe before it goes out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Mathers. I know that Congresswoman Waters has a question, then Senator Miller, and then Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs-Jones.
This will only take a moment if you would come back to the...
I'm new at this.
As you know...
So this is important. This is Maxine Waters. She's still in office right now. I'm going to go over that a little bit more in a moment.
There has been a lot of discussion about, I think it was Duopoly company, their relationship to the president and the administration, and supposedly comments about helping to ensure that the president was reelected. In your world, in your environment, have you heard any of this kind of discussion? Do you know people who vote for Duopoly? Do you have any sense of any actions that may have been taken?
I don't know anything about that at all.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, I suspect people will attack you in terms of your credibility. Could you restate once again your credentials?
I'm a programmer. I worked for NASA, worked for ExxonMobil, worked for Florida Department of Transportation, and other elements of my story, because this company, well, let's get into it. Why not? This company also, they have NASA contracts, and they were basically downloading tons of information, I mean gigabytes worth, and handing them off to this little Chinese guy named Henry Nee. And it didn't seem right, and he was hacking things, and I wrote a program for DOT that allowed contractors to send their information into DOT, and he was kind of the quality assurance guy for software. He put a wiretapping module in the program that went out to the contractors so that it actually sent everything they sent back to Yang. So I reported all this, and just last March, I think, he was arrested for attempting to send anti-tank missile chips to the capital of Communist China. So, if that's correct, this is such a small thing. Of course, I think he only got a $100 fine. And no time.
Thank you. Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs-Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to...
So Maxine Waters was present for that, and that actually led to her... I actually looked this up while we were watching that, because I knew it would be relevant, was I was curious like what the follow-up was. But she was present for that, and then actually this is still sitting on her website. Let me pull up the link. Here we go. Congressman Waters calls for investigation of voter fraud in Inglewood. Congressman Maxine Waters announced that she has asked Attorney General Eric Holder to initiate a federal investigation by the Department of Justice into allegations of voter fraud in Inglewood, California. This is back in like 2009, I guess is when the press release was. But basically she, this is all just still sitting there, and she's one of the people who spoke out quite a bit. Let's switch over to that now. suggesting that it was preposterous that anybody might steal the election. I mean, imagine. It's funny is that, by the way, I got nailed by YouTube for talking about this subject for about 10 seconds on one of the Rittenhouse court trial streams, and they banned me for a week for that, and I still have a community guideline strike for that on my account, for just discussing this topic. It was only allowed to be discussed now, but anyway. So here's some video of Maxine Waters discussing lies about election fraud.
California Congresswoman Maxine Waters, ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Let's first, thank you, take a listen to Sean Spicer a moment ago talking to reporters and addressing this claim that Donald Trump has made that millions of people voted illegally.
Does the president believe that millions voted illegally in this election, and what evidence do you have of widespread voter fraud in this election, if that's the case?
The president does believe that. He has stated that before. I think he stated his concerns of voter fraud and people voting illegally during the campaign. And he continues to maintain that belief based on studies and evidence that people have presented to him.
I think it's worth clear said that the president has believed for a while that there is widespread voter fraud, but only 4 days ago did he get the power of the presidency to be able to do something about it. So why not definitively say that he will investigate if he believes, in the administration position, is that there was massive voter fraud?
Well, first of all, the comment that he made was, he said 3 to 5 million people, could have voted illegally, based on the studies that he's seen. But he's very clear that he won the election based on the 306 electoral votes that he got. We're here on day 2. I think let's not prejudge what we may or may not do in the future.
Congresswoman, have you seen any of the studies that Donald Trump says he's seen to prove that millions of people voted illegally?
Well, Donald Trump continues to come up with what is actually lying. He does not have any information, any documentation that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally. It's absurd. He continues to do and say these kind of things. As a matter of fact, he has gone from saying that there were millions who was at his inauguration ceremony when there were no millions there for him. And now he's saying that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally. It's ridiculous, it's absurd, but it's going to catch up with him. I know that he thinks he can do anything he wants to do and get away with it. But I want to tell you, it's 1,000 nicks, and he's going to absolutely undermine his total credibility if he keeps up with these lies.
Congresswoman Aaron Hallie Jackson asked one of your colleagues, Steve King, of
I'm not going to give her any more of the time of day, because you get the point. The same person who was present at that hearing where a man testified that, software exists to do these things, is then later, when they think they've locked it up, then all of a sudden she's all about how crazy that is, and so the main topic here had to do with which party is the biggest threat to democracy. Let's go back to this Vox article that I've been attacking on this stream. Those of you just joining us, welcome. But remember, it's Trump supporters have embraced anti-democratic ideas. And what is the evidence for that? Supporting any kind of election fraud claims, or at least Trump's. I wonder how any of these people would respond if you made them watch those videos now. But what are the other reasons on here? The idea that Republicans are embracing violence. This is great. Never mind the fact that there's plenty of video of, BLM and Antifa types specifically engaging in violence and encouraging it. Republicans see Democrats as something worse than mere rivals. Well, that's if you ask Democrats the same question, they would say the same thing. That's just the nature of how incredibly polarized we are right now. Republicans dislike compromise, so this is apparently also only a thing that Republicans do, supposedly. The Republican Party is a global outlier and not in a good way. I don't even get into that part. And then, of course, then they need to throw racism in it. it needs to be, it needs to be about that, Um, and partisanship causes Republicans to justify anti-democratic behavior. Once again, this is a thing that both parties engage in, but the idea is that, Vox goes into this big long list, right-wing media is apparently at fault, um, how America's political system creates space for Republicans to undermine democracy. It basically, it's some of the most consequential Republican attacks on democracy happen at the state level. So all of this would just give you this idea, and I'm going to close this article down now because these are just some of the common arguments that supposedly Republicans are the only people who engage in this sort of thing. And just as, Obama admitted at the end of that one clip, that both parties have a tendency to screw around with elections. But the idea that we're going to discuss, which one of these parties is supposedly worse at this is just ridiculous. Political parties are a threat to democracy as far as democratically electing our officials before all the people of we're a republic, start screaming. Yes, I get it. We've been convinced that it's better that the mob pick from a very small group of people who've been pre-selected for us, and that would be better. No, I don't think so. But a lot of that, to really understand it, has to do with understanding why the founding fathers opposed democracy in the first place. But we'll get into that later. I worked for Senator Mike Gravel, and he and I discussed this because he was looking into a constitutional amendment in regards to this issue. But when it comes to which party is against democracy, which party is a threat to democracy, both of them are. But I think the one that is blatantly ridiculous at this point is the never-ending finger pointing specifically at the GOP, when you have situations like this. Democrats ramp up efforts to block RFK Jr. from appearing on ballots across the nation. This is on CNN, okay? This is not some right-wing conspiracy theory website. This is CNN, okay? And, went out of their way to get him removed from the ballot everywhere that they could. And again, this is a duopoly issue. This is one thing Republicans and Democrats both agree on, that they would like to maintain their duopoly. They want to force all the populists to have to vote for George Bush from the Republican side, and they want to force all of the progressives to vote for Biden or Hillary Clinton or whoever. They don't want there to be choices, and that's why, as John Jackson pointed out earlier, it's silly to me that the people that are supposed to be the threat to democracy and that Trump supposes is the biggest threat to democracy, literally went out of their way, to rig their own primary in both 2016 and 2020 quietly, and then openly rig it this time, and then it wasn't enough for them just to try to rig the Democratic primary. They then fought to try to keep RFK off the ballot everywhere else, even when he was an independent. When they lost their ability to deny him the right to a primary, they just kept on trucking, and this is like the sheer hypocrisy. And yes, we're going to talk about Cornel West here in just a second, actually. But that's par for the course with third parties. Libertarian Party and Green Party constantly has to fight to get on the ballot, and the duopoly always figures out ways, to make it harder and harder and harder. And this is again something that was never intended in the Constitution. There's a reason there's no political parties in the Constitution, and it's because, as George Washington pointed out in his farewell address, who I might add was the only independent president in the history of the United States, was the first one, was that he had a lot of concerns about political parties, and that a lot of the founding fathers had fled England due to the fights between political parties breaking out into riots and assassinations. Sound familiar? But they basically, going back to RFK, they just simply canceled the Florida primary altogether and then just submitted only Biden's name. Like, they just, they want to control what choice you have, while at the same time telling you that the other side is the threat to democracy. And then this just continues because, they basically, they anoint Kamala without a single vote being cast for her. That whole situation is so crazy to me because she basically was so unpopular that she didn't even make it to the first primary. Okay. Like, Tulsi Gabbard kneecapped her because, exposing her ridiculous viewpoints on, like supposedly being a, anti-police presidential candidate or whatever, when she had put a whole bunch of people in jail for marijuana offenses. But anyway, the idea that you can just continue to fail upward. She didn't even make it to the first primary. That's how unpopular she was. Then she gets picked as the VP candidate, despite that. And then she gets to be the nominee without a single vote ever being cast for her, right? How can you manage to figure that out? Like, how does that work? How, like, you have to support democracy. And how do you have to support democracy? By voting for our candidate that we handpicked for you. Okay, and only voting for our candidate that we handpicked for you. We will control what choices you have while telling you we are a democratic republic. Like, what is the point of having a republic if we have zero choice as to who our candidates are? Because we don't. And that was proven, I mean, long before this. Like, I'm going to go back into this because I bring this up all the time. Okay, that after the big blowout when Bernie Sanders was clearly cheated in 2016, there was a lawsuit filed, and the DNC defended themselves against it. The lawsuit was from Bernie supporters who wanted their money back after donating to the Democratic Party when it was discovered that the election was fraudulent as far as the primary. That the party was literally trying to rig it against him. This is why Tulsi Gabbard left the Democratic Party and endorsed Bernie Sanders. Okay, but you can read this transcript, but they literally defended themselves in court, okay, by saying that they have a right to pick candidates in back rooms, that they could draw straws if they wanted to. These are all things they said on the record in court, that they're a private organization that is not in any way like beholden to the Constitution, that they can pick their candidate any way they want. Okay. And I remember during the course of all the shenanigans with Bernie back in 2016, like every now and then you can catch little clips of video of Democratic Party officials saying that it was not meant to be a democratic process. You have to vote for Hillary Clinton. They're going to anoint who they're going to anoint, and that the primary is just a straw poll, and that they're still going to make the decision for you. So anyway, they basically just made this argument, and what's worse, they won. They won. They won with this argument. They literally made this argument and won. So if that's the case, and the Republican Party could have done the same thing, and in fact, they didn't want Trump either, as many people tend to forget. They didn't want Trump at all. They wanted one of their pre-prepared plastic candidates, like Cruz or Rubio or they did not want Trump. Okay. They wanted Jeb Bush. That would have been great for the military-industrial complex, obviously. But Trump told them, if you guys, try to treat me the way that Bernie was treated, I'll run third party. And at the time, the Libertarian Party would have fallen all over themselves to have Donald Trump on their ballot. Absolutely. Okay. So that's the only reason this didn't happen on the other side. It's not that the Republican Party didn't want to do this. And, if you don't believe that, or if you think that this is just a Democratic Party problem, well, I would bring back up, as I've brought back up in the past, another Republican who ran into similar problems. In fact, that video that I shared with you of Clint Curtis testifying before Congress was originally being shared on Ron Paul forums. Okay. And here's an example, of what it was like back then, because they kept doing things. First of all, there was weird shenanigans with the machines again, but also just like they wouldn't allow Ron Paul into the debates, and they kept changing the criteria to try to get rid of him. And I remember once in particular, they didn't let him into one of the debates, but they were letting Rudy Giuliani in. So Ron Paul asked them, well, what are the criteria? He's like, well, you have to poll higher. He's like, I poll higher than Rudy Giuliani literally everywhere. Okay. But you got to remember, Ron Paul was on board with the idea of impeaching George Bush. Ron Paul was against the war in Iraq. Ron Paul was against the Patriot Act. So again, I hammered on the Democrats really hard in the beginning of this because they're the biggest hypocrites right now. But let's not forget for 1 second that both political parties are totally willing to do this if they think they need to. And that's because the whole political party thing is an illusion. The sooner you recognize that there's really no difference, the better. I mean, join parties if you have to, like to vote for specific people, but don't let these people in any way get you into their tribal mentality. So let's take a look at this.
I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing out here tonight, but the debate is inside of St. Anselm's, and I was expecting a bigger crowd out here, frankly, but only the Ron Paul people seem to be here, and we're out here trying to chronicle the color leading up to the New Hampshire primary.
What Paul debate? What Paul debate? What Paul debate?
I work for WMUR's sister station, the NBC stations in Vermont, Portland, Maine, Vermont, Boston. We all are part of the same Hearst group, 28 stations around the country. And we come here every 4 years in the week before the primary.
And how does the whole thing strike you?
A lot more intensity this time. Last year, our focus was Howard Dean and the grassroots energy that he was bringing to the primary, which of course didn't work out the way we expected. And we're seeing that. I saw it today at Obama and Edwards events over in smaller towns on the western side of New Hampshire. And but there seems more intensity this year than in 2004, no question.
Let Paul debate! Let Paul debate!
It's the Fox News debate that's going on, and Ron Paul was not invited, apparently because there wasn't enough room at the table. Literally, at the table, there was not enough room for him to sit down and debate. So that's what's going on right here. So he's not there. That's why we're here debating it.
I'm a student in Southern California, and I had the winter off, and the Operation Live Free or Die asked students to come out here, and they if you got out here on your own money, they'd put you up for free as long as you canvassed Ron Paul and did that stuff like that. And I said, hey, that's a great idea. I mean, I've been following Ron for a while now, and I like his ideas and I like what he stands for. So took a trip out here with my girlfriend and decided to do this.
Paul debate! Let Paul debate!
I'm a college student, Cal State Fullerton, and we try to do some things locally at home, canvas locally, but this is the major thing for me. And politics is new to me, but he makes the most sense out of any candidate, out of any person I've ever seen, and so he really makes me want to go out there, find new information, and really get into politics and find out what's going on in our world. So that's why I'm here.
Let Paul
So we don't have to listen to that whole thing, but what she just said there is very important because that's actually what got me involved was Ron Paul. It was specifically a clip where he was arguing with Rudy Giuliani about why we were attacked on 9/11, which the media, of course, tried to spin into him being a 9/11 conspiracy theorist or whatever, but he did support an independent investigation. His primary argument was all of that happened and nobody got fired. Like, nobody got fired. So it was clear to him that there was a cover-up of some kind. He wasn't saying that the government itself was involved. Now, my own views about 9/11 notwithstanding, I definitely still have a lot of questions, but it wasn't just him. And what they're talking about Ron Paul being somebody who makes the most sense, who comes across as the most honest and sincere, was also true of Congressman Dennis Kucinich on the other side of the aisle, or Senator Mike Gravel, who I also, like I said, I worked for, who ran for presidency that time. I worked for his campaign. And so that is something that they don't want us to ever go back to. This idea that we should actually have some kind of, thoughts about our presidential candidates, that we should have some kind of pull over who they are. They really, really, really worked very hard to condition us to be okay with this idea that they're going to give us shittier and shittier candidates every 4 years. And that we just have to pick from the ones that they have picked for us. So again, that's why I say, I don't know that you could say necessarily that a republic on its own is the best path, because it's if you could make political parties outlawed, which is why they weren't in the Constitution, you'd be going a lot further, or you would need to make all political parties okay. Inevitably you can't avoid faction. But George Washington talked about how important it was to fight against faction because of the fact that you start doing things that maybe they're not what's in best interest of the country, but they are what's in best interest of your party. And both sides do this. Both sides do this. There could be a bill that would be extremely popular with the American people from either side, and it's not going to get passed if it would make the other party look good. So they do things all the time to interfere with the system to be sure that the other party never gets any kind of a victory. And that becomes more important to them, than anything else. So the truth of the matter is, is political parties are the threat to democracy. Political parties themselves are the threat to democracy, period. Just having them is a problem, especially if they are given so much sway over what choices you're even allowed to make. They get to decide who's even on the ballot. Okay, so somebody's saying here, yeah, I'd be willing to talk to Ghost Politics. I'm not familiar with them, but by all means. I almost invited Johnny Walker Dredd on for this show today, but he wasn't sure about the topic. He doesn't study it a lot. So, but anyway, oh, look at that. It's Tam. Hey, Tam, what's up? The original mod. Oh, yeah. But no, political parties themselves are the problem. They are a threat to democracy. Okay. And they should not have any kind of power, especially to determine who we get to vote for. That's why the whole system of the republic at this point is completely flawed. And it doesn't mean you switch to direct democracy either. However, I have seen that a combination of both direct democracy and elected officials works. But things like recall elections are an excellent example. If somebody is polling below 30% because they're that unpopular, why do you have to stick with them for 4 years? Right? Like, what is the point of that? Okay, well, it's because the establishment wants to only have to placate us every 4 years. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to play another clip here, and this goes over the media's presence in all of this. And this is a video actually that I did before. It's part of my Do You Think for Yourself series, which I'm actually working on developing a new episode for right now. But I'm going to play this episode for you guys. And, I'm sure a lot of these people, haven't seen it yet, especially since I see some new faces. Yeah, thank you very much for the compliment. I actually had about 6,800. I keep losing subs. Then people keep coming back to say why, I subscribed, I didn't unsubscribe, what happened, but yeah. And Bryson, I would say that it's not just susceptible manipulation. Have you noticed that they just seem to really want candidates who are just going to do what they're told? Joe Biden was very obviously a placeholder, okay? And that's, again, not a party thing. Ronald Reagan was pretty clearly mentally incapacitated for like his entire last year as a president. Both parties do this. The president is a thorn in the side of the establishment as a position because they would much rather have somebody that they can simply control behind the scenes. And when you look at the way Kamala is already being handled right now, and I mean it, she's being handled, right? She won't do interviews unless she's, allowed to pre-plan everything, knows all the questions, has her support animals sitting next to her, whatever, she's just going to basically be shoehorned. And, some people think that Obama is probably actually running everything, which I think is possible since he's the one that's the reason we had to deal with Joe Biden in the first place. So, but anyway, let me play this other video here about our democracy, a danger to our democracy. And it's going to talk about the media specifically, and in many ways, kind of like, one of the other things I think I tell people here is, that is really important. There's a reason you're listening to me, or at least I hope, rather than Fox or MSNBC. Okay. Because both sides of the media, of the MSM, used to own our democracy. So here we go. So Elon Musk shared this tweet, and I went ahead and shared it on my wall. And And I think he did it specifically because of what is in this video. And I decided that while I did share the tweet, I want to go ahead and do a Do You Think for Yourself video on this topic specifically. And as I say here, when the mainstream media says our, in quotes, democracy, it's a Freudian slip. They believe they own it. And for many years, they did. In other words, our democracy does not mean you and me. It means the mainstream media owned our democracy. And who purchased that? Well, that would be the people who own the mainstream media. This is kind of what I was trying to communicate when I debated Sitch and Adam on this topic, because they believe that money has nothing to do with the outcome of elections. I'll probably still do a video about that later, but the main point here is this. When the media says a danger to our democracy, this is what they're talking about. And when you see other, like particularly the leftists who dominated Twitter, talking about our democracy, they were referring to the advantage that they felt they had when Twitter was being manipulated to be dominated by only one side of the narrative. Now, to my right-wing listeners, don't believe for a second that this is not also an issue on the right. And I'm going to get into that in a moment. But first, let's listen to this bipartisan media, meaning both sides, well, all sides of the media, are featured in this montage of media outlets, all seeming to say the same thing.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our
greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories that simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So when you listen to that, again, one of the things you notice is that all of these people seem to be reading from the same script, despite the fact that some of them work for CBC, ABC, MSNBC, NBC, and Fox. And that's because very few people actually own all of your mainstream media outlets. And I've discussed this on previous podcasts, but I will say that what we're looking at is this. During the Reagan years, they deregulated specifically the fairness doctrine. It used to be illegal not to give both sides of an issue. Then, during the Clinton administration, they deregulated how much of the media one person was allowed to own. There used to be a limit. Like, I think it was like you could only have like so many radio stations or TV stations, and then you were literally forbidden by law to own more of it. And then finally, there was a federal lawsuit against Fox News that they won, wherein essentially the determination was that the news is not actually required to tell the truth. So all of those things together contributed to what we have in the modern media. Now, so far as our democracy, if you look at the history of how the media has controlled, quote unquote, our democracy, then you will understand exactly what they are really worried about. They're worried about the fact that they will not own our, quote unquote, democracy directly anymore, or at least it'll be much harder. If you listen to that rant, part of it was to say that independent media outlets were reporting disinformation or adding their own bias, as if the mainstream media hasn't been doing this for years. And again, this is a bipartisan issue. Joy Reid and, say, Hannity, or, they all have their bias. And you're usually tuning in because it matches your bias. People who actually want to hear the truth, well, that's kind of a smaller subset of the citizenry, which is unfortunate. But that's what I'm trying to fight by having this channel. Let's move on. This one is one of my personal favorites. I am frightened by the impact on society and politics if Elon Musk acquires Twitter. He seems to believe that on social media anything goes. For democracy to survive, we need more content moderation, not less. This is a profound statement, but it kind of reflects what unfortunately many people on the left who are currently on board with censorship believes, which is that unless they are winning, democracy is not functioning. And they enjoyed having their finger on the scale, so to speak, to control the narrative in one direction. If there is any narrative control, whether by the right or the left, you don't have a democracy. Because a democracy is only going to actually correctly function if everyone has a free access to information and then can arrive at conclusions about how they want to vote in their best interest based on the information they have. The problem is they want you to vote a certain way, and so unless they can control what you see and hear, they don't feel the democracy is working. I've done multiple videos on this topic in the Do You Think for Yourself series, some of which you'll have to watch on BitChute, because ironically the censorship video was censored by YouTube. I also did one specifically, about why are they panicking that Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter. I will also put that one at the end. And it's really important that you look at this, because science actually shows that if you can convince about 25% of a given population to agree or to believe in an idea, that it tends to create a social chain reaction that will lead to the rest of a society agreeing too. That's what they're fighting over. And to them, democracy isn't working, again, unless they're controlling what information you are exposed to, unless they are winning. Before the internet, our elections were drastically different than they are now. And this was definitely true for both the Democrats and the Republicans. The media used to control who got into the debates, and, well, they basically still do, but the debates were primarily, and I believe still are primarily, the way that people make decisions about what candidate they're going to choose. So they had total control over who you were even exposed to. If they didn't put somebody on television, they didn't exist. It was a very different time. The same thing is true of what documentaries you might see. Really everything was controlled because you only had maybe 12 channels on one part of your television, and then if you clicked another dial, you could get access to a couple more channels on another part of your television. There wasn't 3 million channels. There wasn't internet uploading. The choices were extremely under control of the mainstream media. And so going back to the main point here, when they discuss what they believe is our democracy, they're referring again to the media having previously just owning democracy. The ability to control what candidates you even hear about is the real threat to our democracy, quote unquote, our. When you want to control democracy, because once again, it's their democracy, it's not just about the debates, especially now that we have the internet, but it used to be. They used to just control democracy entirely, but now that's a little more difficult with the internet. But again, going back to the main point, the media, who is again purchased and owned by extremely wealthy people, also gets kind of notes about what candidates they should reflect on positively and what candidates they should reflect on negatively. And this is once again true of the left. I mean, here we have MSNBC, and it's just as true as, on Fox on the right. They have specific people that they're told to favor by the people who own these companies. And it, they may give an interview, say, to Andrew Yang or, somebody like that. But if there's somebody that they've been told to disfavor, then the pundits are going to ask them questions that are designed to make them look stupid. And they're going to talk about the candidates in a negative way when they're not. So there was a clip of Tucker Carlson speaking out in support of Ron Paul at one point. And then he was directed away from ever speaking about him again. That was a long time ago, but it's an example of what we're talking about. Not in a situation to defend themselves, and then they will give positive questions and easy questions to the candidates that they've been told to favor. This was all covered and understood back in 2008, but again, this is their democracy. This is the democracy that belongs to the people that spent the money to own the corporations that run your media. And when it comes to third parties, well, the media kind of ensures that they don't exist. They create really stringent rules to determine who gets into the general election debates. And if they report on third parties, it's usually to do so in such a way as to make them look like ridiculous, fringe elements. And in some cases they are. I'm not saying that they're not. I mean, the last Green Party candidate was a straight up tanky socialist, and the Libertarian parties had some crazy candidates in the past. That's true. But the reality is that's not how our democracy was meant to function. That's not what the Founding Fathers had intended at all. That's the reason political parties are not even in the Constitution. We were supposed to be able to run as individuals based on the merits, of who we were and what positions we had as individuals. And people were supposed to be able to decide what their views were based on, their own experiences as individuals. And what I mean by that is, for example, I'm a pro-gun rights, pro-healthcare person. That's not even possible in our current, situation. You're told that you're an extreme right or extreme left based on your position on either of those things. And I've talked about this many times in the past. So who is it that benefits from this? Well, one thing that the two major parties agree on is they don't want anyone else in the, getting in their way. And so the Republicans and the Democrats both work together to be sure that third parties don't get into debates and don't get attention. And so, again, our, quote unquote, our democracy, they bought and paid for it. And they don't want you to interfere in it. If you really want to be free, if you really want to think for yourself, you're going to have to recognize that this is true not just of elections, but of just about anything the media says about, current events, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's the COVID vaccine, whether it's anything. And you're going to have to check yourself for bias, because everybody has them. It's a question of where does your bias come from? I try to make my bias come from extensive research about the topics that I'm trying to come to a conclusion on how I feel about. And that used to be how most people would conduct themselves, the scientific method, right? But be honest with yourself. If you heard a rumor that was negative about Joe Biden and you happen to be somebody on the right, you're probably going to believe it. If you heard a rumor about Donald Trump and you happen to be on the left, you'd probably believe it. And that's kind of what they're banking on. The difference is the media used to be paid to be reliable. That used to be the concept, was that we're going to tell you the truth and you decide. But all of that's gone now. So, once again, consider this very heavily when you decide what you're going to share or what you're going to believe. So that was one of my videos in my Do You Think for Yourself series. I'm going to be making another video in that line pretty soon here. A lot of people believe they're thinking for themselves. They're not really looking at how they get their information. So I want to go over what I learned working for Senator Mike Gravel when it comes to democracy versus republic. And it has to do with some things that some people are not going to like to hear. But here is the situation that most people don't discuss. The way that the colonies originally governed themselves before there was a United States was through town hall meetings. Literally, you show up everybody gets a voice, everybody gets to talk, everybody gets to, cast a vote. That's how the colonies used to govern themselves. And the reason that it wasn't working was because of the fact that they wanted a United States. They wanted it to be one nation. And it's really important to remember something here. The vast majority of the founding fathers, while well-intentioned, were all extremely wealthy. Okay. And I know that Republicans are now getting around to realizing that maybe the super wealthy are not necessarily their friends. Took them long enough, right? But some of the founding fathers were incredibly authoritarian. And like Madison was quoted as saying, the wealth of the nation should rule the nation. That's plutocracy. Okay, that's rule by the wealthy. That's not like an actual democracy. It's certainly not a democratic republic. So the issue, ironically, had to do with slavery. Okay, the northern states had some states where they wouldn't ratify a constitution that allowed for slavery because there was a big population of Quakers back then, a religious movement opposed to slavery. And Ben Franklin was actually in support of that at the time, was that they did not want slavery to be legal in the colonies. And as you can imagine, in the South, there were colonies because slavery was so deeply embedded in their economy that would not ratify a constitution that prevented slavery. And so every time they tried to ratify the Constitution in the normal democratic town hall meeting fashion, it failed. So the plutocrats who wanted that united front, basically came together and said, well, what we need to do is convince everybody that they should instead pick delegates to go to the Constitutional Convention to make the decision for them. And that's where you start hearing the propaganda about democracy is two wolves and a sheep, voting on what's for dinner. And, and this is why I said earlier, there are problems with majority rule, but that doesn't mean that democracy should instead be the sheep will vote for which wolf they want to be in charge. And which wolves would be available? Well, the wolves that the wolves pick, because that's what we have instead. Okay. Neither system is perfect. I think a combination of both is really what's necessary, but that includes democratic referendums. And if you look at state ballot referendums, a lot of changes can happen that you're not going to get through your elected representatives because the elected representatives are owned by the corporations, Republican and Democrat. It's no different. You cannot get near the presidency unless you have either been wealthy yourself or have convinced enough wealthy people who will then in turn make you wealthy that you should vote, that you're the guy or the girl. Okay. That's how it works. And it's important to realize that whether you're a middle class struggling Republican or a lower class struggling Democrat, it's really time for people to stop blaming each other. There was a really funny thing. We were talking about the media earlier, right? There was this funny meme that got passed around that was, basically said Fox News is wealthy people paying other wealthy people to convince middle class people to blame poor people. And in counter to that, MSNBC is wealthy people paying wealthy people to convince poor people to blame middle class people. You'll notice that the actual people at the top who cause all of these problems, the super wealthy, and by super I mean ridiculously wealthy, that's another thing that the founding fathers could have never really had a full grasp on how dangerous it was going to be, was people who had so much wealth that just, to the point where you can have your own space program, that is a big threat to quote unquote our democracy. Okay. You guys were talking about libertarians being idiots earlier. This is the reason why I can't be an anarcho-capitalist, because the idea that people with wealth would just somehow decide not to abuse that power for the first time in human history was just ridiculous to me. It's just as utopian as trying to be straight up communist. So, but the idea is that it's important to understand that the reason why our direct democratic systems that we used to use at town hall meetings to govern ourselves as a people was taken away from us was because they were trying to protect slavery in the Constitution. Really drink that in, because that's the truth. That's why Senator Mike Gravel was seeking a constitutional amendment to allow for referendums like we have on the state level. I'm not saying that every state level ballot is always going to be great, because they're not. But Mike Gravel's point on the issue was that if the people are directly impacted by poor decisions they made, they also, at that point, will be empowered to do something about it. Whereas in our current situation, the elected officials that we have are instead incentivized not to make things better for us, but, well, at least up to a certain point. They're instead incentivized to cover up for their mistakes or figure out ways to reword reality or control the media narrative to make them not look like mistakes. And that's not superior. So it's important that people understand that we're not a democracy, but we're not really a constitutional republic in the strictest sense either. Because, you know, if your choices are so limited, and I can't imagine how anybody, looking at the way that third-party candidates have been treated over the last, century, would ever believe that, this system that we have right now is somehow a constitutional republic as suggested by the founding fathers. But it's important to understand, when they convinced delegates to run for the Constitutional Convention, when they convinced people to accept that idea, who do you think won those elections for the most part? Who do you think won the colonial delegate elections to be the representatives? Well, it's not going to be a blacksmith because he can't leave his smithy. It's not going to be a farmer because he can't leave his farm. It's going to be somebody who's fantastically wealthy. So even from the very beginning, from our first constitutional convention where we had this delegate system, it was the wealthy being elected by the poor to go make all the decisions for the country. Those people, a lot of people point this out, a lot of the founding fathers were motivated by not wanting to be taxed by England. They didn't give a shit about us. I think it was Hamilton was the one who was constantly fighting with Thomas Jefferson about this. But the reason we needed to have a Bill of Rights, the reason why there was an argument about a Bill of Rights was that Hamilton, I'm pretty sure it was Hamilton, was the one who was incredibly authoritarian and just believed that we should just control, what the plebs do, what the poor do, and that they need to just understand that we're in charge, and so wealthy people consistently believe that they are entitled to positions of authority. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've certainly noticed this. People change when they get a lot of money. They change a lot. And some people will talk about that as like communist propaganda or whatever, but the truth is that, if you want to have a system or a society that's actually going to solve all of our problems, the sooner we figure out that there are things that are correct that are being said by both we saw this at Occupy and the Tea Party. There were things that they agreed upon, okay, that both sides acknowledged were true, okay, and that, in fact, the whole point of Occupy was protesting the bank bailout stuff, where a bunch of bankers convinced the government, you better give us the money for these loans that we gave out, knowing that people couldn't repay. Oh, and by the way, now that you've given us all the money for the loans, we're also going to repossess all of the houses that we sold to people with these fraudulent loans, and then we can resell those. It was all double dipping. And the Tea Party and the Occupy movement came out from that. And I honestly think it's one of the biggest reasons why wokeness was introduced to the left to destroy the Tea Party. Not the Tea Party, the Occupy movement, was Ron Paul had said to the Tea Party, hey, man, we have common enemies. We should be working together. So they were desperately against that. So the answer to the question is, which party is a threat to democracy? The existence of political parties in of themselves ensures that we do not have a democratic republic. Because in the end, these small groups of private entities, literally can defend themselves in court by saying we have the right to pick our candidates in the back room if we want. That's what's crazy. They were, if you remember the Clint Curtis video I just shared when he said if the exit polls are significantly different than the results, then it's probably hacked, right? During the primary, and this is actually what got my channel banned for a week during the Rittenhouse trial, was I mentioned this for about 20 seconds during a 6-hour stream. So somebody had to have been listening. But anyway, there were anomalies in the Democratic primary wherein exit polls were reporting considerably higher vote turnout for Bernie Sanders. And in all the places where there were no electronic voting machines, Bernie Sanders won by a landslide. But here's the screwed up thing. The way that because of that lawsuit that I mentioned earlier, it doesn't even matter. It's not illegal for them to rig primaries. It's not. They could get caught red-handed and nobody would go to jail because that court decision determined that, point of fact, the Democratic Party or any of these political parties is fully within their rights to go ahead and rig their primaries. They can pick their candidate any way they want. Okay? And if that's the case, you don't have a democratic republic. You have two private organizations picking your candidates and picking who gets to be elected. Don't scream that you're all about a republic until you really think about what's going on. Because the reality is, we don't have any kind of choice. It's just like George Carlin said, it's the illusion of choice, right? You know, the American dream, because you need to be asleep to believe it, right? So think on very hard on that. In addition to the fact that I would hope that you look very close at how out of control the partisanship is, okay? Like, politics back in, say, we'll say the 80s, right? You might have a Dukakis sign up on your lawn that was a Democrat. You might have, but the other guy might have a George Bush Sr., sign on his lawn, but you'd still invite each other to the neighborhood barbecue, right? That's not true anymore. We're being told that the other side is not just somebody you disagree with, that they're inhuman, okay? Like that they're evil. And our democratic process for determining who gets to be elected in our republic at this point is a race to the bottom. They just keep producing shittier and shittier candidates every 4 years. Like, there's sex impropriety allegations on both Biden and Trump. Okay. There's plenty of video of Biden, outright molesting girls in public, right? That's who we have to choose from now. Like, we get to choose between, grab her by the pussy, or we get to choose between that or a guy who's like got his hands on this redheaded girl, who he's like pulling to her, who's very clearly trying to pull away from him. Those are our choices. And you get told, well, now we get to choose between two people who might be rapists, right? That's just sheer insanity. Okay. And the notion that, you're in that situation, it becomes instead, this is why people like Bernie and RFK and Ron Paul and Kucinich were a real problem for them. They don't want you to legitimately like your candidate. They don't want you to believe that your candidate should share most of your values. They want you to accept whoever they're willing to give you, according to their values. Whose values? The super wealthy's values. Who's going to keep the establishment? How did Biden win? Nothing will fundamentally change. Okay? That's it. And so the sooner you recognize that, the better. It's just getting worse and worse every 4 years. And that's why I said I don't really know who I can vote for now. I mean, I was going to vote for RFK, but at this point, I'm just kind of the opinion that I can't vote for either major party, and I won't. And that's why I'm B Radio. That's why you see an image of, the character V with a, dismembered elephant and donkey, because the two political parties have got to go. Otherwise, the rest of this is just a farce. The sooner you figure out that the conflict, at least at the core level, between the Republicans and the Democrats is about as real as WrestleMania 3's conflict between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, the sooner you figure out that these two parties, basically are choosing between them is like choosing between WWE SmackDown or WWE Raw. Okay. And no matter which choice you pick, it's still bullshit. Okay. It's just that simple. As far as like this, because I see these comments a lot. I don't agree that Bernie was a shill. I discussed this with Mike Gravel. When Bernie realized he wasn't getting elected president, then he wants to continue to be able to get things done. And basically at that point, his power base is about being able to develop compromise between the two parties to get certain things. That's one of the benefits of him being an independent. But there's only so much he could do. That's basically what it comes down to. So as a consequence of that, you can't, he could just burn the bridge down, but then we wouldn't have Bernie Sanders in the Senate. It's funny is actually I almost did a show about this. It comes down to the fact that he just did another speech recently in front of the Senate, and it got no attention, but it was about wealth disparity and all of the different things that that he says that are the reason why he was so popular. And I realized the left doesn't even talk about any of that stuff anymore. They don't talk about Medicare for all. They don't talk about any of the things that Occupy was about. They don't talk about any of that kind of stuff. None of that. And they won't. And instead, the left has now been distracted with bread and circuses in the form of pronouns, racial issues, all kinds of other stuff, and very big on trying to divide us. That's really what this is about. They definitely cannot, have any. They cannot allow us to ever be conditioned again to believe that we should actually believe in who our president is. And I know you guys are not Bernie supporters. You guys know that I voted for him in 16 and 20, but you still come to my channel because I'm going to tell it to you straight. But I also don't fault you for disagreeing. But most of the Trump supporters that I spoke to back in the day still said that if they had to choose between Bernie and Biden, they would have went with Bernie. And I tend to agree. In fact, I had Trump supporters who voted for Bernie in the open primary because they wanted him to get nominated, because at the very least they would be dealing with Bernie and not with with Trump. But in any case, that's something we're just going to have to agree to disagree about. As far as Bernie, I am kind of curious about what he's going to do now. I can't believe that he continued to support Biden past a certain point. But as far as the issues that he was bringing to the forefront, I think that they're extremely important. And I think that, at the end of the day, the reason they needed to get rid of him is that they don't like a guy that steps up and shows how bad the situation really is in regards to wealth disparity. Because you have to consider for a moment, no matter what side you're on, this system is not friendly to anybody that points out what's really going on with the men behind the curtain. Okay. They want you to, just accept whatever they give you. And they give you enough concessions. George Carlin used to talk about this all the time too. They give you concessions to keep you placated, but at the end of the day, it's all bullshit, So thank you guys very much for tuning in. If there's any topics that you want me to cover, please come join us on Discord. My HY page doesn't work anymore. I guess they want me to pay for that service now, so I need to find another place to put all my links. But I am on BitChute, Rumble, Discord, Odyssey. I'm on Spotify. I'm on a lot of different podcasting venues. If you guys want to check those out, come to my Discord, even if it's just to get that information, if you'd rather listen to me on Rumble or BitChute or any of these other places. Especially because I'm trying to be redundant, because I'm kind of surprised I haven't gotten banned yet. I'm shadow banned, that's clear. But I'm surprised I haven't been banned yet. Like when they got rid of Neo Unrealist channel, I was really surprised. So let me do a little bit of Q&A here, folks, and then we'll be out of here. So if anybody has anything you want me to talk about, bring it up right now in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and put up a poll that you guys can vote on. Thanks for sticking with me. And we'll see, and then I'll read off the poll. So I'm going to type out the thing here now. One second. Republicans, Democrats, and then okay. All right, the poll is up, folks. Thank you for listening to this stream, and we'll talk about that more. But this is what's up now as far as political parties. You know, which party do you think is a bigger threat to democracy? And I hope that you learned something. As far as how am I feeling? Well, I lost about 140 pounds, but my spine is still really messed up. And in fact, the funny thing is it actually feels more uncomfortable now than it did when I was heavy. I don't even know how that's possible. I can get around a little better, but basically the moment I stand up, I can feel a crunching where like my discs are grinding together in my spine. And eventually my lower back muscles start to shut off. So I can get around better than I did, but literally like there's a whole probably 1 foot section of my lower back that just buckles the moment I stand up. Like, you know, that's one of the reasons I could never actually go to protests and stuff like that ever again, because it would be way too dangerous for me. Yeah, I can see everybody's still saying it's the Democrats. It's like, even after like looking at this poll now, even after everything I revealed about how the Republicans also rig their own primaries when they can get away with it, people are still voting Democrats rather than political parties. It's unfortunate. So anyway, all right, so question about that. Talk about the stats showing how intolerant Dems are. Let me go ahead and pull that up on the thing so you guys can all see what I'm reading from. Talk about. So this is an interesting point. I actually said this to somebody recently because people are asking me why I talk to so many conservatives. And I said, well, here's the difference. If I went to a protest with a Barney shirt on and carried an American flag, I could stand next to the Proud Boys. They wouldn't care. Antifa, on the other hand, would attack me. And they did. They attacked a Bernie supporter for carrying a flag. They actually bloodied the back of his head. If there's any intolerance going on, I have plenty of Trump supporting friends. Tons. You know, I was actually like driving on a long road trip with a friend of mine because our daughters were both wrestlers, and he was wearing his Make America Great Again hat, and I was wearing my Bernie t-shirt. You know, and hey, we could agree on one thing, and that was we both hated Hillary Clinton, you know. But yeah, in general, you know, there's definitely a difference, and it's largely because you have to remember that the left is currently rewriting what violence means, and you know what they think constitutes a justification to be violent. You know, you have to remember that they've convinced themselves that they are fighting the rise of fascism, you know, and that gives them the right to essentially engage in a George Bush preemptive war strategy of physically attacking people that they don't agree with. And, you know, I got to tell you, man, the way I am now, like, it's, you know, there's a reason I'm armed. Because, you know, I'm not letting what happened to people like Andy Ngo or Kyle Rittenhouse or that guy whose name I forgot who got kicked in the head in Portland, Oregon. It's not happening to me. So if you see me drop off for a long period of time, might mean I'm in jail. So hopefully it never comes to that. I just am careful about where I go. But anyway. So Winning is sending me something on Discord. Oh, hello, Winning Reality. Let me see what's on here. Throw this up for him. Actually, that's a good. Hold on a second. All right, hold on a second. We're going to share this, but then there's another clip I want to share. 1 second. All right. This is what Winning Reality, friend of the show, just told me to share, so I'm going to restart it.
So they claim to be peaceful and be all about inclusion. Well, I think this says something a little bit different.
Watch as this guy goes to a Biden protest in a Trump shirt and a Trump event in a Biden shirt. You can clearly see the difference between Trump and Biden supporters.
I'm right into the Biden protest with a Trump shirt. Get your
across the street.
What the f*** is everyone so hostile?
Go over there with your people.
You guys are my people. Look.
No, you're not. You're Trump.
No, Biden says children, not Trump. No, stop. Don't snitch. Stop, I'm blending in. No. Why is everyone so angry? I'm just walking the sidewalk. You see how much hate it is over here? It's a public sidewalk. I feel like I'm gonna get jumped out. Oh, man. So when you poured water on me, did it make you feel happy? Yeah. I have to change shirts. Can I hide behind you? Okay.
Don't give me a
okay. I was feeling crazy today. Hey, come on. It's just.
So they claim to be peaceful and be all about inclusion. Well,
that guy got off easy, man. If they were Antifa president, they would have beat the shit out of him. That's what's messed up. And I've never been threatened by a Proud Boy ever. Not once. I have friends that are Proud Boys, and we know we don't agree on a lot of things. But, you know, and I'm not saying they're not individuals who might, but it's, in general, that it's not the same attitude. Let's see if I can find this. There's actually another really funny clip. That's really funny. It's a really funny clip that is really funny. Yeah, you know, because I know what I'm talking about. But you guys should watch this, and I'll probably like make this the last thing we do together. But there's a couple of clips actually. All right, here we go. Let me find this real quick for you guys. This is really, really, really important, guys. So it's funny, but it's also incredibly well done. So, and I know I've shared this with you before. So let's have a look at it.
We are here in protest!
We are also here in protest.
What do you think you're doing?
Exercising our First Amendment right. What are you doing?
Standing up for what's right.
Bullshit.
Black Lives Matter.
All lives matter.
Abolish the police.
Support our boys in blue.
Wear masks, stay inside.
Coronavirus is a hoax, folks.
Racists.
Communists.
Fascists.
Snowflakes.
React with pure emotion.
Facts don't care about your feelings, unless they're my feelings.
Violence is okay if you're mad enough.
Finally, I can practice self-defense.
America!
This is fucking great. I couldn't have done it without you.
Anytime, man. Fucking idiots.
So I actually make people watch
a deranged, threatening man runs loose in a neighborhood.
Sorry, I make people watch that video on before they're allowed to participate in my Discord chat. So did you guys like that? You know, there's one more that I always share, but it has to do with like what's going on with our political system specifically and what motivates people. But yeah, that video is brilliant. And what I liked about that one was just that it does a great job of characterizing the negatives of both sides to some extent. You know, violence is okay if you're mad enough. Raw. Finally, I can practice self-defense. No, it was good stuff, man. So, all right. So here's another one. And the funny thing about this next clip is that this is an old clip. This is like, and the problems that he's bringing out here in this clip are just as true today. And this is before the internet. And the internet has made what he's talking about in this clip so much worse.
Seriously, though, we've heard a lot about extremism recently, a nastier, harsher atmosphere everywhere, more abuse and bother boy behavior, less friendliness and tolerance and respect for opponents. All right, but what we never hear about extremism is its advantages. Well, the biggest advantage of extremism is that it makes you feel good because it provides you with enemies. Let me explain. The great thing about having enemies is that you can pretend that all the badness in the whole world is in your enemies and all the goodness in the whole world is in you. Attractive, isn't it? So, if you have a lot of anger and resentment in you anyway, and you therefore enjoy abusing people, then you can pretend that you're only doing it because these enemies of yours are such very bad persons. And that if it wasn't for them, you'd actually be good-natured and courteous and rational all the time. So, if you want to feel good, become an extremist. Okay, now you have a choice. If you join the hard left, they'll give you their list of authorized enemies. Almost all kinds of authority, especially the police, the city, Americans, judges, multinational corporations, public schools, furriers, newspaper owners, fox hunters, generals, class traitors, and, of course, moderates. Or, if you'd rather be an extremist on the hard right, no problem, fine, you still get a lovely list of enemies, only they're different ones. Noisy minority groups, unions, Russia, weirdos, demonstrators, welfare sponges, meddlesome clergy, peaceniks, the BBC, strikers, social workers, communists, and, of course, moderates. And upstart actors. Now, once you're armed with one of these super lists of enemies, you can be as nasty as you like and yet feel your behaviors morally justified. So you can strut around abusing people and telling them you could eat them for breakfast and still think of yourself as a champion of the truth, a fighter for the greater good, and not the rather sad paranoid schizoid that you really are.
So that's the reason why they can't have peace. Like, the people that really push the narrative and all these fights on the internet, they're addicted. It's called rage addiction is what I call it. And so, especially when it comes to virtue signal, and that's a problem that just seems to be getting worse and worse, but it really kind of comes down to the fact that people are addicted to it and they dehumanize the other side, and it gives them a license to be a bully and then act like they're doing it for righteous reasons. And that's really the biggest, thing as far as what motivates people to be involved in this kind of stuff. And that's how you end up with, I am going to be right about what my side is doing, even if what I'm saying is not in any way like reflective of the truth. The Kyle Rittenhouse incident is a perfect example of that, because there are still people parroting stuff that's not true that they made up in their head because they desperately want and need him to be guilty. That's, it doesn't matter. That's the analogy that I've used many times in this show, is that it's like playing volleyball in gym class in like middle school, and the teacher calls a point for your team and the ball was out, but the teacher didn't see it. So you just go, shut up, man, be quiet, because you want to win the game so bad that you don't care that you won with points that were not legitimate. That's how these people are. I get told all the time that I'm supposedly a far right activist just because of the fact that I dare to ever call out the left on dumb things that they're doing. And I imagine that goes both ways. But, that doesn't make me far right. As if there was some place in the far right for Medicare for all. Oh, really? You mean there's a Republican faction that's all about Medicare for all? Or any of the other things that we used to think were important, right? And so what I submit to you is that you have been convinced to fight over things that are stupid, to be sure that, no traction is ever given to anything that could legitimately make people's lives better. That's really what it is. There's a statistic that was being put around by, I'm going to forget the name of the organization, but they did the statistics and they found out that if a bill has massive support on the part of the people, meaning a bill before Congress, it has about a 30% chance of passing. But here's the deal. If a bill is extremely unpopular, it still has a 30% chance of passing. In other words, the will of the people is not in any way being represented in our representative government at all. It's funny that you say this, No Cream, is that I have heard that he's like, well, why don't we just do single payer? That'd be pretty funny if he did. But my belief is that in many ways he, from the people who are so spooked out about Trump, I think they believe that he is far more sophisticated than he actually is. Or they don't understand that he's kind of playing a character. But here we have, I too wanted Bernie to win in 2016. I shamefully voted for Hillary thinking that Trump's ego could cause more war. But now I see him being the only shield from global totalitarianism. Well, I will say this. My life and my family's lives were a hell of a lot better under Trump than they were under Biden, at least until COVID. Economy was way better, no question. But yeah, it's good to see another former Bernie voter here on the channel. Make sure you subscribe. I have other content like this. Never seen you before, so welcome. But anyway, let's take a look at this poll, which I have to admit I'm a little disappointed by. Okay, so ending the poll, it says, which party is the biggest threat to democracy? And I had it as Democrats, 53%, political parties, 46%, Republicans, 0%. So what bothers me about this is, like I said, guys, I don't expect you to agree with me about everything. But I just showed you evidence that the Republican Party rigs their own primaries too. So why wouldn't they be a threat to your democracy? Think about it. Think about it honestly. All right, folks. I'm going to be doing another episode of Do You Think for Yourself? And in this one, I'm going to be talking about a phenomenon that violence or negative behavior, if it is down the perceived social scale, is for some reason invisible. Whereas if it's up the perceived social scale, then it's this huge upheaval, and then suddenly everybody speaks out against it. You ever been in a situation where somebody did something horrible to you, but when you bring it up publicly, people treat you like you're the bad guy? Like you shouldn't have talked about that, you shouldn't have mentioned that. And that's because they recognize that the person who mistreated you is probably higher up on their version of the social totem pole. And it's more important that they maintain their social hierarchy games than it is that you get justice. You know, and I was actually looking to see, because this is a very real phenomenon, is that, you know, that people will do this, that, like, you know, you've ever had like the abusive uncle who shows up to Thanksgiving drunk and slaps his wife around or something, and everybody knows he's a problem, everybody knows it's an issue, but they don't speak out against him. And if you speak up, then they're all going to shush you. They're all going to tell you to be quiet, you know, don't cause drama. So the reason I bring these things up in the Do You Think for Yourself series is that I want you guys to be considering that there are a lot of psychological things that go on in the human brain that can prevent you from thinking for yourself. That a lot of your thoughts that you think originate entirely from your free will are actually due to the manipulations of others who understand these rules about how your brain works. The Do You Think for Yourself series is the most important series on my channel. And if you haven't checked it out now, I strongly advise that you do. I use real psychology and science to come to most of these conclusions. And by that, I mean the psychology reports that can be reproducible, because unfortunately, psychology largely does not have that ability. No. Oh, I popped up on your Facebook. That's cool. I'm glad you found me, because I don't think anybody was watching on Facebook today. Where's everybody watching today? Let's have a look. It's gone down just a little bit, but there's 12 people on X/Twitter, and then there's 26 people on YouTube and 1 person on Twitch. So anyway, guys, so that's a almost 2 hour and 17 minute stream today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am looking forward to, hopefully in the comments, you guys will explain to me why you don't think that the Republicans are in any way a threat to your democracy. You know, once again, saying that both parties are. I don't think it's one or the other. I'd be curious to see what you think as to why you voted the way you did. Because looking at the evidence, I don't know how anybody thinking critically could actually believe that either political party is better for democracy. So anyway, folks, thank you very much for tuning in to V Radio. V Radio, the Bob Ross of activist journalism. Here we paint happy little ideas, and there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. Like Joe Biden tripping and falling on his way to the airplane. It's just a happy accident. Exactly. Great stuff, man. It's rare to actually feel smarter after watching a YouTube stream. Thanks, Duopoly. That's actually awesome possum. You're my favorite today, man. So yeah, you're new too. I haven't seen you before, so I hope we'll see you again. Make sure you subscribe. But again, join us on Discord. Even if you don't plan to go on Discord, just there you can ask for my Rumble and Odyssey and all that other stuff, because like I said, YouTube is the platform where I technically have the most people, but I know that my days will be numbered. Eventually I'll piss someone off if I didn't with this stream. So farewell, everyone. Don't do anything I would do, and if you do, don't name it after me.